Welcome into the Slobberknocker Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Leake, and today we've got a monster matchup to preview for you guys on Sunday Night Football. It's the standalone game, the game that's going to decide the AFC East as the 10-6 Buffalo Bills travel down to South Florida to take on the 11-5 Miami Dolphins. 5 weeks ago, a lot of things were different. The Dolphins looked to have the division wrapped up. They were headed for their first division title since 2008. The Bills, on the other hand, were sitting at 6-6 about a month ago. And it looked like the Bills were not only going to lose the division, but possibly miss the playoffs. Some places had them as low as a 5% probability to make the playoffs when they sat 6-6 a couple months ago. But boy, have things changed since then. We now are in a winner-take-all AFC East Divisional showdown here. It'll be played in Miami, where the Bills come in a 3-point favorite. We'll get to the market in a second, but first let's talk about the playoff implications. For the Dolphins, it's pretty simple. If Miami wins this game, they are the AFC East champs, and they will be the number 2 seed hosting at least one playoff game in the AFC playoffs. On the other side, it's a little bit more complicated with the Bills. It's simple if they win. They're the number 2 seed. They would leapfrog the Kansas City Chiefs, who sit at the 3rd spot right now, as the Bills defeated the Chiefs in their head-to-head matchup and thus hold the tiebreaker over Kansas City. However, if they lose, it gets a little bit more complicated. One thing is true. The Bills will know what they need to do going into Sunday night. First part of it comes with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. If either of those two teams loses their game on Sunday, the Bills would be automatically in the playoffs. The Pittsburgh Steelers take on the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore, which would normally be a tall task. However, the Ravens have decided, since they have clinched the number 1 overall seed in the AFC already, they are going to sit Lamar Jackson along with a few other key cogs. Thus, the Pittsburgh Steelers actually sit a 4-point favorite on the road in Baltimore. The other matchup, the Jacksonville Jaguars, looking for a championship in their own right, trying to be the AFC South champs for the second consecutive year. They take on the Tennessee Titans in what could be Mike Vrabel's last game as head coach there in Tennessee. The Titans are going to be fired up for that one, a chance to possibly even knock Jacksonville out of the playoffs if they win that one. However, back to the Bills. If either of those teams loses, the Bills will be in. If both those teams win, the Bills then would be eliminated with a loss to Miami, barring one thing happening, and that would be if the Colts and Texans tie in their final matchup this weekend, then the Bills would still get in. So, Buffalo trying to win and get in the playoffs and host a playoff game. The Bills, though, come into this game. They've won 3 straight divisional titles. They're looking for their 4th straight with a win over Miami. They're also looking to become the 4th team in NFL history to be down 3 games with just 5 games to play in the division and find a way to win it. The last time that happened actually came last year with the 2022 Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Jaguars had a game last season that sent them to the playoffs as they defeated Tennessee last year to get in and win the division. Let's start with a look at the market here. This game opened on Sunday at Bills -1.5. If you were looking at the very, very early opening shops, that was quickly gobbled up by professionals. We saw professional money on the Bills at -1.5. We saw professional money on the Bills at -2. We saw a lot of cheap money lines being laid on Buffalo as well. So clearly the sharp side in this one seems to be Buffalo, at least early on. The total's down a point. It opened at 50.5. We're now down to 49.5. And I think the feeling on this game is that if the Dolphins were healthy, and this was a home game for Miami, that they would be closer to a 4.5 or 5-point favorite. However, a multitude of injuries, which we'll get to in a second, have plagued the Dolphins recently, including a massive loss of Bradley Chubb last week against the Ravens. Now, we currently sit at Buffalo -3, and I think it's where we're going to stay at least until kickoff on Sunday. And we'll have to see where the public comes in on this one. I would have to think with all the media coverage for Buffalo the last week or two, everybody saying nobody wants to play the Bills, all the talking heads talking about how bad Miami's been playing and how good Buffalo's been playing. I would be surprised if we didn't see a public alignment here with professional money on Buffalo. The history of this matchup has definitely favored the Buffalo Bills. They've owned the Dolphins the past half decade, winning 10 of the last 11 matchups against Miami. Another positive for the Bills here worth mentioning, Buffalo comes into this one playing a road game. However, According to Vivid Seats, there's a projection that about 52% of ticket sales are going to be Buffalo Bills fans. And so a majority of Bills fans projected to be in the stands at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. And you wonder, is that going to play a large role here in a game that the Bills were supposed to have to go on the road and win a road game to win the division? Miami was hoping to have some home field advantage here, but it looks like we're going to be, at the very least, relatively even in terms of fan attendance. Let's start, though, with the matchup, and we have to look at the injuries because that's the biggest part of this matchup. And I have to start with the most recent one that I've mentioned a second ago, and that's Bradley Chubb. Chubb tore his ACL in last week's matchup with the Ravens. And look, I've got to say this. I like Mike McDaniel. I think he's an excellent play caller. I like that he's just a different kind of cat, right? I've watched him on Hard Knocks, the in-season Hard Knocks with the Miami Dolphins, and he seems like he's not going to change for the cameras. And I know he says that early in the first episode that they aired, and I think you a lot of the time would see a coach say something like that and then cozy up to the cameras. But the reality of it is that's who Mike McDaniels is, and he's not going to be any different just because there's cameras around. I like that about him. I like that he has battled alcoholism and is recovering and has got his life on track. And he's done a great job with this team, right? I mean, 2 of the first year, people were ready to dump him. It was not looking good in Miami. Mike's come in there and really flipped the culture. They went to the playoffs last year despite having a multitude of injuries that year as well. They now have basically led the AFC East the entirety of this year. But Mike made a massive mistake last week, and I don't understand what he was thinking. Why in the world is Bradley Chubb in the game at that point? There was 3 minutes to go in the game. You are down by 37 points. 37. And you have your starters in the game when you know that in this game that's a loss. You're now playing for the division next week. You've had injuries all year. Guys are going down like flies left and right. The game has been over for a full quarter. Why do you have your guys out there? It wasn't just Bradley Chubb. He had his whole starting unit out there. He should have pulled his guys 9 minutes ago when the Dolphins went down by 30. It was over. It was dead over. Even the Ravens had pulled their starters on the final few drives. So it just didn't make a lot of sense to me. And it's just really, really unfortunate for Miami. Bradley Chubb has been a massive piece for that defense. I mean, he single-handedly, in my opinion, won them the Cowboys game. He blew up plays left and right on that beat-up offensive line for Dallas. And you lose, your best pass rusher and maybe your best defensive player, definitely your best front 7 player. And I think with all the injuries that you've had, Tyreek Hill had an injury last week. You've had Xavier Howard go out. You had Jalen Waddle, who's missed the last couple games. That's not even counting the offensive line, the defensive side of the ball, which we're going to get to here in a second. I just don't understand how on earth you have your starters out there right now. That was an absolutely idiotic move by Mike McDaniel. As much as I like him, you just cannot do that. It just doesn't make any sense, and it's going to cost his team. If it doesn't cost them in this game, it's going to cost them down the line. Let's look at the injuries going into this game here for Miami. We know Bradley Chubb tore his ACL. He's out. We know Jalen Phillips, the starting linebacker, tore his Achilles back in November on Black Friday. Jalen Waddle and Raheem Mostert both didn't play last week. Both have not practiced yet this week, which is not a good sign. Both battling ankle injuries. I think it's pretty safe to say Waddle is not going to play. Mostert's a little bit more up in the air. Defensive tackle Zach Seiler didn't practice Wednesday due to an illness. Star left tackle Taron Armstead didn't practice Wednesday. He did play against Baltimore. He's been banged up all year, battling an ankle, a knee, a back, all those things. I think he's going to be good to go in this one, but he's definitely not 100%. Linebacker Jerome Baker was limited in practice on Wednesday, and he missed the last 4 games with an injury to his knee. That's something to keep an eye on. Robert Hunt, starting offensive lineman, he's been out since week 13 with a hamstring. Hunt's backup, Lester Cotton, was limited in practice on Monday, right? And then you look at the defensive side as well. Linebackers, David Long, Duke Riley, starting safety, Javon Holland, right? There's 18 guys on this injury report Wednesday that were either DNPs or were limited in practice. And that's, I didn't even mention Xavier Howard, who went out last game with an injury. He's been banged up all year. And I think he's the only guy who is possible to play here of those key secondary cogs. So the injuries have been a massive factor for the Dolphins. And the question is then, with all these injuries and all the guys the Dolphins have out on defense, can they hold up against Josh Allen and company? On the offensive side of the ball, the Dolphins have protected well enough with all the injuries. I mean, you have to give them some credit because they do get the ball out quick. They have found ways to keep Tua relatively clean, although the last 4 games haven't been great. He hasn't taken all that many sacks this season. I believe it's 22 on the year, which is kind of right middle of the pack. But again, that offense was rolling even with the offensive line injuries because they had healthy receivers. And now Jalen Waddle's likely not to play. And Tyreek Hill's been battling minor injuries. And Tyreek Hill's house caught on fire yesterday. So just a ton of things going on. You name it, it's happened in Miami. It's been an unfortunate year. But let's look at the matchup real quick. And we'll start with the Buffalo offense versus the Miami defense. And Buffalo, yes, they're winning some games. I understand that. And the media loves to blow things out of proportion, right? They love to talk about how Buffalo's on this hot streak and they've won 3 in a row or 4 in a row. And how good Joe Brady is as a play caller. Oh my gosh, he's come in and they got rid of Ken Dorsey and he's gone back to the run game and everything's going great. And Josh Allen, they've taken things off Josh Allen's plate. But the truth is the media isn't talking about how poorly this team has played the last couple weeks. All right, so let's start with week 15 at home against Dallas, right? So this was a great spot for Buffalo, right? You're at home. It's not great weather. Dallas doesn't play well on the road. Dallas is coming off of what Jerry Jones called the biggest win in the Mike McCarthy era, dominating the Philadelphia Eagles at home, right? So terrible spot for Dallas. The Bills, it's a must-win to get in the playoffs. They can't drop this game. It's a home game against Dallas. They have to win it to keep their playoff hopes alive. And then you add all of that. You add in the fact that Dallas, half the team had the flu for most of that week going into the game. So not a 100% Dallas team. Bad spot, good spot for Buffalo. And still, Josh Allen in that game had less than 100 yards passing. He didn't play very well. I understand they ran all over Dallas, and that's fine. That was a good game plan by Joe Brady in that sense because that run defense has not been very good this season. So that worked. But again, did Buffalo look incredible there? No. Dallas just looked really bad. It was a bad spot. It was a flat spot on the road, like we said. So let's say we give them a pass for that a little bit. Not a pass, but it wasn't a horrible game, right? They won the game by 3 scores. The following week, they take on the Los Angeles Chargers, who just fired their coach. No Justin Herbert, no Keenan Allen. They're playing for nothing. They're at home with no real home field advantage. And what happens? The Bills come out, they turn the ball over. They struggle to consistently move the ball. Stephon Diggs looks like an afterthought, right? And this is all against a horrific Los Angeles Chargers secondary. Josh Allen threw for just 237 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And it takes a last-second field goal for the Bills to even win the game against, a bunch of guys who are playing for nothing and an interim coach and a backup quarterback who's a rookie starting like his 2nd or 3rd career game. It was a bad showing. And then last week, right, even if you give them a pass for the game against the Chargers, saying, it was off a big win over Dallas, it was a flat spot, well, then look at last week. They take on the New England Patriots, one of the worst teams in football. Right? They're coming off this big, this 2 or 3 game win streak, and now they go to play New England at home. It's a revenge spot. It's a great spot for Buffalo. They can't overlook the Patriots. Not only did the Patriots beat them last time, but this is a must-win for the Bills to get in the playoffs. So they're going to come out and give it their best shot. They're at home. And then you add to the fact that the Patriots turned the ball over 5 freaking times. 5 times, not in the first half, in the first 20 minutes of the game. 3 of them being Bailey Zappi interceptions. All of that combined together, you would think this score would be an absolute blowout. But no. Within, the early part of the 3rd quarter, I believe the game was a 6-point game, and it was basically staying there the rest of the game. The Bills end up winning at 27-21. Josh Allen in the game, 15-30 for $169. 1 touchdown. He didn't look that great either. He's been battling some injuries. So, it's concerning to me that Josh Allen and this offense hasn't looked very good, but it's even more concerning to me that the Bills have decided that they're just going to run the ball regardless of who they're playing, right? They were facing a New England Patriots secondary last week that was depleted, that hasn't played well this year, but they came in number 1 against the rush in a number of statistical categories in all major metrics. And it's like, you go into that game thinking, okay, this has got to be a Josh Allen game. They've got to throw the ball here. And they run the ball 37 times for 127 yards. They averaged just 3.4 yards per carry. They threw it they rushed it 7 more times than they passed it, and it was not a blowout. I just have a problem with the fact that you go into a room and look at this Patriots team and you see how good they are against the run, and you decide that we're just going to run the ball anyway. And the game should have never been as close as it was, especially with the fact that there were 5 turnovers by the Patriots. But you look at Josh Allen in the pass game lately, the last 2 weeks alone against a Chargers secondary that's, in all honesty, horrific, right? And the worst part of the Patriots defense, which is their secondary, and Josh Allen in those 2 games, 43% success rate on his dropbacks. That's 21st in the NFL those 2 weeks. He was not throwing the ball well. That's taking out the Dallas game. You want to say Dallas game was bad weather, we run the ball, okay, fine. What about this one? What about the bad secondaries they faced the last 2 weeks? What's going on here? I mean, you look at Diggs, I don't know what's going on with him, but there's clearly something wrong, right? He's playing like 60 to 65% of snaps right now for the Bills each game. They're saying he's 100% healthy. If that's the case, then he's not going to be in Buffalo much longer. He looks disinterested. It's hard to tell. If it's an injury, that might be, better for Bills fans because that means that Josh Allen and Diggs are going to stick together. But if this is not an injury, I don't see any way Diggs comes back because that means he's essentially just not playing, 35, 40% of the snaps because he doesn't want to. The connection from Diggs to Allen has been great until, this year. Allen to Diggs, when targeting Diggs, he's averaging just 5.5 yards per pass attempt. That is last in the league from any starting quarterback to wide receiver 1. Last in the league. If Diggs isn't, healthy, isn't a big part of this unit, this is a bottom 10 receiving core. All you have left really is Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir. The receivers are not very talented on Buffalo. And I've talked about this before. I compared Buffalo to the Raiders. And I said, looking at the two teams, they're very similar with the exception of their quarterback, right? The Bills have an elite quarterback. Well, if the Bills aren't playing well offensively because their quarterback isn't playing well, then what is this Bills team? And that's my worry with Buffalo going into this. Despite the sharp money being on the Bills, I just don't know what this offense is going to do here. And you look at the Dolphins' defense, they haven't been great. Obviously, they're ultra banged up. But if I'm the Dolphins' defense and I'm Vic Fangio, I don't know how you don't just stack the box here. Because the Bills have pretty much said after last week, we're committing to running the ball. We're going to run the ball into a wall until our head explodes. That's what we're going to do. We don't care who's in front of us. We don't care what the look looks like. We are going to run the ball. We're going to give it to James Cook, and we're going to run the ball to Latavius Murray, and that's how we're going to win games. So if I'm the Dolphins here, especially with how Diggs has looked, I'm manning up Diggs with Ramsey. I'm having Ramsey follow him around, and I'm going to load the box and say, beat us throwing to Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir. If they do that, this could be a really, really interesting matchup because I don't know that the Bills can win doing that, especially with how Josh Allen has looked the past few weeks. Really, since Ken Dorsey went out, I think he's looked significantly worse. I know everybody says the Bills are playing better. Well, they're winning games, yeah, mostly against bad teams or in good spots, right? I don't even think the Cowboys are all that great, or the Chiefs, which are their other 2 wins, the 2 kind of good wins they've had during this stretch. So to me, I'm putting Ramsey on Diggs and I'm locking him down. I think Ramsey, with how Diggs has looked the past 10 weeks, probably has an advantage in that matchup. If Diggs, comes out and he looks healthy and he looks interested and he goes nuclear and he beats you, then, he starts beating you, you can adjust. But to me, I don't know how you don't come out and load the box and make them throw the ball to other receivers. On the other side of it, looking at the Dolphins offense versus the Bills defense, this Bills defense has given Tua a lot of problems in the past. And I think this is the side of the ball I'd be more worried about if I was a Dolphins fan because the truth of the matter is Tua is not a very good NFL quarterback. Okay, and you can tell me that that's a controversial statement, but that's the truth. Any pressure on this guy and he crumbles. He's inaccurate with the ball when there's any type of pressure in his face. He throws interceptions. Last week he threw 2 against the Ravens. I know it's a good Ravens defense, but he throws some head scratchers out there sometimes, and he just gets in these spurts where the Dolphins offense looks horrible. And this Dolphins offense and the way that Mike McDaniels has learned under Kyle Shanahan is a run-first offense. Tua should not be a guy throwing 40 times a game. No way should that ever happen if you expect to win the game. And that's how I see this one playing out. If the Dolphins want to have success, they cannot throw the ball 40 times. This cannot be a Tua game here. Right? You look at the offensive line for Buffalo, for Miami rather, they've been banged up all year. And so to me, I just don't know how you could imagine creating a game plan where you drop Tua back 30 to 35 times, right? To me, this has got to be a running back game. You look at the Bills' defense, right? They've trended better as of late, but they're 30th against the run, according to Pro Football Focus, right? They're much better against passers because they can get to the quarterback. They are 15th in pass rush win rate, but they've gotten to the quarterback much more. In that Dallas game, they got to Dak at will, right? And with a banged-up Dolphins offensive line, I could see lots of pressure on Tua, and that's a recipe for disaster. It really is. So to me, this has got to be a run-first game. Bills 30th in defensive efficiency against the run, right? The question is the health of the Miami running backs, right? Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, right? If Achane goes and Mostert can't, how many carries can he handle? If Mostert does go, how healthy is he going to be? Now, I do think any of these guys, if they have a shred of a chance to play, they're going to try to give it a go, right? This is a huge game for both teams. It's definitely bigger for the Bills, right? Because the Dolphins are already in the playoffs no matter what. But with all the injuries and what's going on in Miami, I can't imagine you're going to want to go play a road playoff game. I think you're thinking, we need to get at least 1 or 2 home playoff games to have a real chance to make a run here. Maybe you get a few key guys back if you can survive weeks 1 and 2 in the playoffs. But again, this is a clear game plan for me if I'm Miami, right? Get back to your roots, Mike McDaniel. Get back to your Kyle Shanahan evolved offense where you run the ball to set up the pass, right? The Dolphins, looking at Tua, he's completing just 62% of his passes the last couple games against comparable defenses. He's not at a QBR above 66 the past 4 games. He's not the worst quarterback in the league, but if he doesn't have easy open throws, he doesn't look great. And we know he's probably going to be without Jalen Waddle. So how often are his wide receivers going to be able to win quickly, right, against Buffalo? And if they can't, and those linemen can't hold up for 2-3 seconds, it's going to be a long day for the Dolphins here. It'll be an interesting dynamic, though, if the Steelers or the Jaguars do end up losing, because I would like to see, what this game looks like with relative equal motivation, right? If the Bills get fortunate and either the Jaguars or the Steelers lose, they will know then going into Sunday night that they have already clinched a playoff spot. Right now, this is more of a desperation game for Buffalo, which gives them, I believe, a little bit of an edge. Because if Miami, gets down big in this one, what's the use of putting more guys out there to get injured late in the game? But Buffalo, is going to throw everybody they have and everything they have at this Miami team in this final matchup, knowing they have to get in the playoffs. But what if they are already in? That would level the playing field. That would make this game, in terms of a motivation factor or motivation standpoint, a more equal matchup. I kind of would love to see that happen. That said, I picked the Bills to miss the playoffs, even when everybody was saying they're going to make it after the Dallas win. That's when everybody really started to think, okay, Buffalo has a real good shot to make the playoffs. I said I still think that Buffalo is going to miss it. I don't necessarily I'm not rooting against them necessarily. I like Buffalo. I feel bad for the fans of Buffalo. They haven't had a Super Bowl. But the truth of the matter is, the Bills haven't looked great as of late. And I don't buy this notion that Buffalo wins and gets in the playoffs, and now everybody's terrified to play them. I don't think they're any better than the Chiefs. I don't think they're better than the Ravens. I definitely don't think they're better than the Browns. So, yes, it would be harder to go into Buffalo and win a playoff game, but, I don't see the Bills as some juggernaut this season. If the Bills win and get the 2 seed, they're likely going to be looking at the winner of that AFC South matchup, assuming Jacksonville wins, between the Colts and the Texans. That would be who Buffalo or Miami would host as the 2 seed. The loser would drop to the 6 seed and get likely the Kansas City Chiefs, who I believe are locked into that 3 seed. So, that's our big game breakdown for this NFL Sunday Night Football matchup between the Bills and the Dolphins. I'm going to go ahead and give my official pick here. I picked the Dolphins to start this one. I really don't have a ton of confidence in it just because of all the injuries with Miami, but I'm not going to change my pick now. I'm going to stick with the Dolphins. I think the way I broke this game down, Vic Fangio's a smart guy. I think he's going to load the box and make Josh Allen throw it. He hasn't done that all that well as of late. I don't like how Diggs has trended lately, and as much as I dislike Tua, I think Mike McDaniel is smart enough to know that this is a run-first game, and if the Dolphins run the ball at home and get a lead early, I think they have a decent shot to hold on. I know the professional money's on Buffalo. I would not bet this game, right? I'm not touching this game in the market. I've bet a few other NFL games, but I am not touching this one. But I will pick the Dolphins. I'm going to say Dolphins win it by 3 in Hard Rock Stadium Sunday night and clinch that number 2 seed in their first division crown since 2008. The Bills will likely miss the playoffs unless they get some help with that loss.